Hi, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you all to the September Meetup. As you're aware, today we'll be learning about tips on how to design surveys as monitoring and evaluation professionals. And we have a very capable person in our midst to do that. But before she takes the stage, I would like us to quickly introduce ourselves in the chat window and also let us know where you're joining us from and what you currently do. I'll give us a few minutes and then we'll engage in a very short ice-breaking activity. So please let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and what you currently do. All right, so I will go first. So my name is Linda Nsifo. I am based in Accra, Ghana, and I am the initiator of Women in Research, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning. So we're basically a community targeted at women to accelerate their careers in research, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And basically since January, we've been having these meetups just to engage with professionals, people who are new to the sector, people who have practiced for a number of years, just to exchange and share knowledge and experiences and how to improve on, various practices within the sector. And so I'm glad that you're all here. So I'm eager to know where people are joining from so that I can read them out. But while people are doing that, I'll share my screen for the ice-breaking activity. So just give me a second. I'll just move to the screen. So I hope you can all see my screen. Okay, great. Okay, so just to share a few thoughts, or give people the opportunity to share. So when you see this image, what comes to mind, or what are you reminded of? There's no right or wrong answer. Please feel free to share your views about it. So personally, for me, one thing is that I can relate to this because I work closely with a number of projects in the organization I work for. And sometimes when you're helping projects to set targets for their indicators or like to pick indicators to report on, it can be like a zoo of a sort. So like you have so many indicators, so many options, you're wondering which one to report on and so forth. So sometimes it can be a whole lot. It can be overwhelming for some of the project leads. And speaking from experience, sometimes you have to take your time as the monitoring and evaluation officer to explain what the indicators are, what they do, and how it will help them to report better on their projects. And the aim of these indicators is just to measure progress, whether semi-annually or quarterly, helping projects to stay on track, basically. So I'd like to hear views from the rest of you. What are your thoughts? Okay, let me go to the chat. Okay, so Blessings has introduced herself. So she said, hello, everyone. My name is Blessings Kigaraza from Zimbabwe. It's my absolute pleasure to be part of this session. And we're glad to have you, Blessings. Okay, we have Magdalene. So she says, hi, everyone. I'm delighted to join today. My name is Magdalene Nickel from Germany. I am the chairwoman of Mikana E.V, an NGO that works in education projects in Zimbabwe. I study a master in evaluation and currently work for Clone House Nigeria as an M&E associate. We're pleased to have you, Magdalene. And to everyone who has joined us, you're all very welcome. So we're just engaging in this short ice-breaking activity. Tell me what you think about this image that I've share it with us all. What comes to mind when you see this indicator zoo? I'm sure some of you might have seen it already, but so that we can engage before we dive into our session or topic for today. Any thoughts? You can also unmute yourself and share your thoughts, or you can type in the chat window. So just give us maybe about 2 minutes to share what we think about this image. Can you relate? Do you agree with what someone has said in the speech cloud? Okay, 1 minute more. Any views? There's no right or wrong answer. Anyone wants to try? Okay, so Sheila has shared her view. Any 3 indicators presents a limited view of the program. Okay. Would you like to explain further?
Well, I can imagine that anyone who chooses just 3 of 9 indicators is going to have that very limited view of the program. And let's say a different member of the evaluation team picks 3 different indicators next year. And so the report after report, you're never getting a robust or complete picture of what's going on in the program, if those are even the right KPIs.
Yeah, that's an interesting viewpoint you've brought forward. Thank you so much, Sheila. Okay, so I think we can end up our ice-breaking activity here and just dive straight into our topic for today. So I'd like to introduce our speaker. So our speaker is Sheila B. Robinson. She's an education specialist of Custom Professional Learning, LLC. She's a speaker, educator, program evaluator, and consultant with a passion for the science of teaching and learning, presentations, and asking good questions. Through her talks, professional development workshops, and university courses, Sheila teaches people how to make learning stick and how to ask good questions, along with program evaluation, survey design, data visualization, audience engagement, and presentation design. Sheila is the author of Designing Quality Survey Questions, published by Sage Publications in 2018, and writes a popular blog with numerous articles on survey design, learning, presentations, and other topics. Sheila is also a certified presentation specialist, vice president of the Presentation Guild, and senior design and facilitation consultant with Evergreen Data. Wow, amazing. So, Sheila, we are pleased to have you, and you're welcome to speak on the topic for today, tips on how to design survey questions as a monitoring and evaluation professional.
Thank you so much. I'm just arranging a couple of screens here so that we can get ready.
Sure.
I'm excited to talk with you about survey design. In my bio, I know it gets very confusing because I do a lot of things. I'm very interested in teaching and learning and presentations and asking questions and program evaluation, and survey design is just one of my topics that I enjoy. But it's one that I enjoy almost the most out of all of these. So I do a lot of different things. I hope you'll connect with me. Feel free to email me or connect with me on social media anytime after this recording or presentation, and I'll be happy to speak with you. I do have a handout for you today that goes along with this talk. Now I'm going to put that link in the chat. So if you want to grab that handout, you don't need to grab it this minute. You can take it anytime after this session as well. But that will have some of the relevant points I make. And probably if you see something on the screen that you think, I want to take notes or I want to take a screenshot of that, it's in the handout. All of the relevant information that I'll share with you is in the handout. So here's a quote that I just love. If you do not ask the right questions, you do not get the right answers. And so this is something that I've certainly learned along the way as a program evaluator and a survey designer. I've made lots of mistakes, and now I enjoy teaching survey design and trying to help people avoid the easy mistakes that we can make in designing questions. Mistakes like this. This comes from Best Buy, a multi-billion-dollar company, and still they've made this mistake. They're putting a whole bunch of items with the same scale, which sometimes works, except that that first item absolutely doesn't work. The specific product you were looking for was available for purchase. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would I know even what to score? That's a yes or no question. So what if I put a 7? What will they do with those results? What does a 7 even mean for this survey item? So we want to make sure that our survey question stems and our response scales match. That's the first lesson, and probably the most common mistake that people make. Our goal with survey design is to find this sweet spot between what to measure and how to craft the questions to measure it. Well, it's actually how to craft the right questions, not just any questions, but we hope to get to the right questions. Now, before I get too far into it, I want to ask you a question, and I hope that you don't mind putting a few words in the chat. What bothers you the most about surveys or survey questions? When you're given a survey as a respondent, what bothers you the most? Or what problems do you see when you take surveys? The length of the survey, yes. I don't know anyone who enjoys really long surveys. Cumbersome and lengthy questions, yes, when we have to read 2 or 3 times just to understand what's being asked, and the question just feels over complicated. That's such a problem. We usually approach surveys when we are respondents, we approach them saying, you know what, I will donate 10 or 15 minutes of my time to give this organization some data, right? So we're being willing to do that. Let's not make it hard on people willing to donate their time, right? So whatever bothers us about surveys, let's not do that to our respondents. So why focus on survey design? Well, my co-author, Kim Leonard, and I wrote our textbook, and we identified more than 7 reasons to focus on survey question design. I'm going to share just a few of these reasons with you today. First of all, we noticed that surveys are imperfect tools. This is how we came together to do this work. Survey after survey that we encountered had problems, problematic questions, and so on. We know that surveys are self-reports. We know that self-reported data can also be problematic, and so we have to be careful in how we craft questions to make sure those self-reports are as accurate and meaningful as they can be. We know that surveys are developed without enough study. We both worked in organizations where leadership developed surveys that were very problematic. These were folks that were maybe experts in their field, but they did not have a background in research or evaluation or any survey design background. We know that survey fatigue is a problem. All of us are over-surveyed. Every time we turn around, there's another survey coming to us, maybe through email or at the bottom of a receipt when we make a purchase. Every time we visit a website, they want to have a survey for us, and we get tired. But the big reason that at least Kim and I entered this work is that we found that question wording can dramatically impact the response and the data quality. So I want to share with you one of the stories that I share in my workshops. I have several stories that illustrate the profound need for paying attention to the words that we use. Now, this one story that I'll share with you today is called Experiments in Wording Questions, and it dates back to 1940. It is probably the oldest or the first research study that I'm aware of on looking at question wording. Now, this is US centric, it's US based, but the lesson is universal. Let's take a look at this A/B testing that they did. They took half of their respondents and sent them question A, and half of the respondents got question B. And these are just yes/no questions. Let me give you a moment to read. So the question differs only by one word. Should we forbid or should we allow? Now, logically, these are opposites. If you were someone who said yes to question A, you would logically say no to question B. And if you said no to question A, you'd be saying yes to question B. But let's see what happened when they actually looked at the results. So this yes and no should line up, and they don't. They're very far apart. This yes and no should line up, and they don't. They're very far apart. Now that DK was don't know, and not surprisingly, the don't knows do line up fairly well because, you know, if you don't have an opinion or you don't know. So why does something like this happen? Well, questions aren't just in a vacuum, they're in a context. And part of that context is our emotions as humans. Now, I can speak at least from a US perspective. We don't like to hear the word forbid. The government wants to forbid you to do something. That doesn't feel good to most of us, and it evokes a negative response. Whereas being allowed to do something feels very positive. So right away, when we read questions, our brains are processing and making sense of them and associating some emotional response as well. So just changing a word changes how people feel. That's so profound. But first things first, taking a little step back. We have to make sure that if we get excited, I'm going to create a survey, I'm going to collect some data, we do have to make sure that a survey is the right tool for the job. Many times I've been called in as a consultant, Sheila, come help us design a survey. And it turns out, given their information needs and what data they hope to collect, they really need to be using focus groups or individual interviews or on-site field visits or observations. So we always want to make sure that a survey is indeed the right tool for the job. So let's take a look before we talk about how we as evaluators and researchers should design surveys. Let's take a look at what our respondents have to go through in order to answer questions. It can be quite hard on them. This comes from a meta-analysis by Schwartz and Oyserman that references on that handout. And they looked at questions about behavior, but these lessons can be applied to any questions. In posing a behavioral question, researchers hope that participants or respondents will be able to understand the question, of course, and be able to identify the behavior. Now, it sounds simple enough, but if you posed a question to me that asked, how many times in the last month have I read a magazine? I need to know what you mean by read a magazine. Do you mean read every article cover to cover? What if I just read 2 articles? What if I just skimmed through and just looked at a few things? What counts as read a magazine or not? So identifying the behavior can be challenging. Next, we hope that participants will retrieve the relevant instances from their memory and identify the reference period. For example, if you asked me a question about the last 3 months, I have to think about what today's date is, September 29th. And then I have to think, okay, so that's almost all of September. Then I have to think all of August and July. Now, do I go back to June 29th or would I go back to June 30th? And, and if it's the middle of the month, am I counting this month or am I just counting 3 full months? Different people will interpret that reference period differently. So we want to be careful with that. Then our respondents have to search that period. Let's see. Oh, I did read that fascinating magazine. Oh, wait a minute. That was in June. It doesn't count. So I have to put dates on everything. Then I have to add it all up and then look at the response options the survey gave me. Does my answer fit with whatever intervals I see? And lastly, I have to candidly provide the result. Do I feel comfortable enough with these researchers to be perfectly honest, especially if it's a sensitive question? Let's say you asked how many times in the last month I've consumed alcohol. That's a little bit of a sensitive question. Now, assuming I've gone through everything, I understand the question, I know what consuming alcohol, I know what you mean by that, and so on. Let's say in my mind, I counted up and I came up with 8. And let's say these are the response options that you gave me. And now my brain is doing all kinds of sort of turning upside down, saying, wait a minute, I'm at 8, higher than the highest category. I don't think of myself that way. I think I'm a moderate or medium drinker. They must know what they're talking about, those researchers. So maybe I'm more in the middle. I'll just put 3 to 4 because I think I'm average. So that response scale is going to influence how I answer. But what if the response scale looked like this? Now my number of 8 that I came up with, now that fits. I thought I was probably an average level person here, and now I can fit comfortably there. So my brain is saying, you researchers, you must know what you're talking about. On the left side, if it's 7 or more, that must be the real problem area. But on the right side, maybe it's not a problem until it's 13 or more. So our brains make all kinds of assumptions based on the scales that we see. Something like this, here's a real question. How much do you spend on groceries at a supermarket? Now, I'm not good with budgeting, so I'm not somebody who actually knows the number off the top of my head. And I'm not one of those, we're not a family who like regularly shops. We go every Wednesday and spend X dollars. We're not like that. So now my brain is doing some sort of mental calculations, and I'm thinking these researchers must know what they're talking about. Under 300, that must be an individual living on their own. 1,100 plus, that must be a very large family, all living in the same household. So then I start to think, how large is my family? Where do we fit in? And I'm making guesses based on the scale. Now, bad questions are a real problem in survey design. And we learn from looking at these examples, like this one. Now, I've cut off the rest of the question. I didn't want to out the organization. So I just took a screenshot of the responses. How helpful did you find whatever it is? Now, can you spot the problems? I hope that you can. Can something really be neither helpful nor unhelpful? Excuse me. They were trying to write a good question here. I want you to think about something in your kitchen, maybe a tool or an appliance or a gadget. And if I came to your house and said, oh, you have one of these, is it helpful to you? You would probably tell me, oh, yes, this tool is so helpful. Or you would say, no, this tool really isn't helpful in the kitchen. So either it's helpful or it's unhelpful. So we're squeezing the language here, and it's just not working. Here's another problematic question. How satisfied were you with the products? Take a look at that scale. That's not a satisfaction scale. Even though the word satisfactory is in there, that's not a satisfaction scale. If you ask how satisfied were you, then I would expect a scale that maybe starts with very satisfied and goes all the way to very dissatisfied or unsatisfied. So we've mixed up a satisfaction question with a rating scale. Words like very poor, poor, good, excellent, those are rating words. So how would you rate our product? Then that's the right scale. Here's another one. Take a second to read this. So again, this organization really tried to write a good question. They want to know if you were aware of who publishes this health letter, newsletter. Well, are you aware that this center is the publisher? Well, oops, I'm sorry. Clicked too fast. My response was, I am now. I'm aware now. But then how aware? What's the difference between very aware and extremely aware? That just isn't working. Someone told these folks that you're supposed to have 5 points on every scale, and that's just not true. What they needed to ask is, were you previously aware that this organization publishes this newsletter? Then you could say, yes, I was previously aware, or no, I was not. Now, the good news is that this organization did change their survey, and it's better. Here's one from our U.S. Postal Service. Again, we have a matrix with lots of items. You don't need to read all the items. We have a strongly agree to strongly disagree. They did it as a 6-point scale. That's perfectly fine. The problem is that this one, package was delivered to the correct address. On an agree scale, I guess strongly agree is if they delivered it to my house. Mostly agree is they delivered it to next door. Somewhat agree is 2 doors down. No, that it's just silly. The problem here is somebody said, put all the items on the same scale. It will be easier for respondents. And that's not true. If the item and the scale don't match, that is not easier for respondents. That confuses respondents. It's very easy to ask a yes/no question. Was the package delivered to the right address? Yes or no? And then go on to a matrix with all of these other items. That's perfectly fine. I get a lot of my question examples from healthcare. I don't know why healthcare. I have a hard time finding really good survey designers. Were you able to make an appointment quickly and easily? That's also a yes/no question, but they used this rating scale. Were you greeted with a smile? Also a yes/no question, but they gave us a rating scale. So, and in the age of COVID and pandemic, our healthcare workers have mostly been masked the last few years. So I don't know if I was greeted with a smile, honestly. And then another question. Upon arrival, was the registration quick and efficient? Also a yes/no question. Now they could reword those. Can you rate the registration process? Then a rating scale is appropriate. So we don't want to squeeze all of the survey items onto the same scale when they don't fit. I'm going to give you a minute with this one. This was a toughie. Same organization. Now, in my position, the answer for me for the first part of the question is no. Is this your first visit with the organization? No. And now I read on and it says, if yes. Well, my brain is saying, but wait a minute, I'm not a yes, I'm a no. You're telling how the yeses should answer, but how should the no's answer? So confusing. I was feeling like this. And check out that question number. I had already answered 18 questions by the time I got here. Talk about your survey fatigue. Then I get to a confusing question. No. More good news, though. This organization also changed their survey, and now they've separated it out. So let's think about what they really needed to measure. Is this your first time? Yes or no? That's one question. Do you plan to schedule future appointments? Yes or no? Second question. 2 easy questions are much better than 1 confusing question. And now I want to let you know that even though we have so much to learn about how to design good questions, that it's not just about the questions. Designing a survey is a process. And my co-author Kim and I developed this purposeful survey process that starts here with this pre-drafting and planning where we outline a purpose for the survey. We do that in writing because we want to make sure that when we do get to the question construction or question design phase, that every question we ask is aligned with our purpose and, of course, aligned with our research and evaluation questions. We get very clear on what it is that we're trying to measure. So when we see these mismatched questions, like asking about satisfaction and giving a rating scale, we want to get clear. Are we measuring people's sense of satisfaction, or are we measuring how they would rate our product or service or this component of the program? And so that takes a little bit of discussion to get that level of clarity. And of course, we need to know our respondents. We need to understand who they are. If we're surveying people who work in an environment, we need to understand that work environment and the climate and the morale and what their challenges are and how their days look. We have to get to know who they are. We have to know the kind of language that is okay to use. So in some instances, we can get casual. We can even use a little bit of humor in a survey. In other instances, it should be very formal and professional sounding. So we have to know. And in developing questions, we have a couple of different routes. We can source questions from existing surveys. If you need to measure depression or self-esteem in adolescents, there are already good survey scales instruments that you can use. Often, if you're anything like me, I work in unique, small, local programs. So I'm usually crafting questions from scratch, usually as part of a team for a unique situation. And sometimes it's a combination where we take inspiration from surveys that have already been designed. And then, of course, finalizing. We have to pre-test our surveys. Never let a survey leave your desk without other eyes on it. I know this from personal experience. Even if I've proofread and I feel I've been so thorough, any survey I let go without a good pretest comes back with mistakes that I just couldn't see. So any way that you can pretest or pilot test with a small group of respondents, please do that with your surveys and get some feedback. And of course, we have to prepare for administration. We have to think about how this survey will get to people. Is it email? Do they get a link online? Is it paper? Is it telephone? In person? How are we going to reach those people? Now, here's the entire process that I just shared. And we focus here, but it's important to acknowledge that so much more goes into it. And we haven't even talked about sampling or analysis or reporting. So those are, of course, parts of the process too. Now, I do want to leave you with some tips for designing your own questions. So everything that I share is based in the research on question design. First, plain language. It's so easy for us to let a jargon word or some word that we use in our professional lives get into a survey, or an acronym that should be spelled out. So pre-testing can help us determine whether we've used plain language that will be understandable by our respondents. We want to ensure that those question stems and response options match. Getting clear on what exactly we want to measure is going to help with that. We want to use item-specific response option scales. Now, what this one means is we often lean on those agree-disagree scales. And sometimes it's better to just use the words that align with what we want to measure. So let's say you want to measure confidence. Just have a confidence scale. How confident are you? Very confident, somewhat confident, minimally confident, not confident at all, something like that. How useful was this aspect of the program? Very useful, somewhat useful, and so on, right? Item specific versus if I had to say, if you want to measure confidence, you don't want to have me think about some sentence and whether I agree or not that I feel confident, right? So that's actually more brain work. We don't want to do that. For most survey items, between 4 and 11 is a good place for how many. You do not have to use a 5-point scale every single time. 5 points works very well for some survey items, not very well for others. Sometimes you want to go to a 4 or 6 point and it's balanced, positive and negative, because you want people to express on one side or the other a positive or negative feeling. You don't always need a neutral or a neither. To the extent possible, verbally label your scale points. Let's say you're using a scale of 1 to 5. It's best to pair some verbal labels with those 1 to 5. At the very least, label 1 and 5. Never just say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about something? You must give people some direction. Now use yes or no items rather than check all that apply. So it's very easy to write check all that apply questions, but they do get problematic. Imagine a long list. Let's go back to your kitchen Which of these appliances do you own? And it's a toaster, a blender, an air fryer, an Instant Pot, a rice cooker, I'm trying to name all kinds of ice cream maker. Let's say there was a long list of appliances. It's very easy for respondents to just tick off a few and then say, you know what, I've told them enough. And they never really see the bottom of the list. Much better to say, do you own a toaster? Yes, no. Do you own a blender? Yes, no, right? And it's each item has a yes, no. And it's very easy for respondents, even though that might take a few seconds longer. The research suggests that it will be a little bit more accurate that way. And lastly, avoid ranking questions. So here are 7 items, rank them in importance. I know we like to ask respondents to do that. It is very hard for most respondents to say that, this item is a little more important than that item, because often we feel like these two are equal in importance. Ranking items can be difficult for respondents, and they are challenging to analyze as well. So those are my 7 quick tips to go along with today's talk. Here's kind of the bottom line. We can do the best that we can do, but there is no one right way. Now I'm just going to close it out. I know Linda put the link to the book. That's great. If you go to the SAGE website, you can get a couple of chapters for free, so no obligation to purchase the book. These are some of the other courses I teach. And before I close out, I want to offer you a little extra gift if you want it. It is on my website. It is my program evaluation workbook. So often I speak to groups about evaluation, and I created a workbook for some of my former clients, and so now I've made it for everyone. So if you want to go to that link, SheilaBRobinson.com/PE workbook, or you can grab that QR code and that'll take you right to my website. And that'll be a free download for you. Okay, and if you didn't have a chance to catch that, I'll make sure that you get that link in a follow-up. All right, here's how to keep in touch with me, and I certainly hope that you do. Now, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheila. That was very insightful. Yeah, it got me thinking about some of the mistakes I've been making in setting or developing survey questions. Some that I've done in the past, and I mean, yeah, occasionally the ones that I do sometimes from time to time. Yeah, so the floor is open for questions, comments. Please feel free to share your thoughts or ask questions, burning questions you might have on developing or designing survey questions. So you can type in the chat, or you can also raise up your hand and I will unmute you as well. Or you can just unmute yourself and ask Sheila directly. Okay, so we have Blessings. Please go ahead, Blessings.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheila, for that very insightful presentation. So I just have a question concerning the type of questions that one can use, especially when we're looking in the field of social sciences. The debate concerns with the question, which of the approaches is better suited to record social phenomena, and to what degree should we use quantitative and qualitative? That is, when and can they be integrated when we're looking at social sciences?
So is your question about using closed-ended questions versus open-ended questions and gathering quantitative versus qualitative?
Yes, that's correct, but mainly focusing on quantitative and qualitative.
Yes. So typically the majority of your survey questions will be quantitative or closed-ended and produce quantitative data. Many surveys have one or more open-ended questions. Now, open-ended questions that don't have a response scale and that ask respondents to write or type or speak using sentences and paragraphs, they can yield really important, rich, nuanced data for you that can corroborate some of the quantitative data that you've asked in other questions. So they can be very valuable. But open-ended questions are typically more challenging for respondents to answer. People have to not only be able to gather their thoughts about whatever you've asked, but then they have to put them in writing. And that is kind of hard for people, right? It's much easier to answer a question in a conversation in an interview kind of format than it is to have to create sentences and paragraphs. So respondents do tend to either skip open-ended questions or give you very limited responses that aren't very helpful. So you want to think about which data you would really want in a narrative qualitative format. What is important to ask, and how can you ask in such a way that helps that respondent really know what you're asking, right? So being very direct, asking one question at a time. Sometimes we use tricks like, imagine you are speaking to a friend about this program. What would you tell that person? What are the best parts of the program that you would share with that person, or something like that? We use little tricks like tapping into people's emotions. One of the things that I've used with open-ended is when I want to understand people's experiences, especially in a training session, I ask, how did you feel during the training? And then I give them all kinds of words: frustrated, happy, energized, renewed, overwhelmed, interested. And then the second part of the question is, why did you choose the words that you did? And people will start saying, well, I felt frustrated because, I felt energized because, I felt inspired because. And then it makes it easier for them to share their experience in the training session. So that's a little trick that I've used. I'm going to address this question in the chat. How do you go about selecting respondents for a pretest? Yes, they should be representative of the real respondents. And so how do you sample among those? And do they fill in the survey a second time once it's finalized? Yeah, so a lot of good questions here. So when you're working with a small local population, like maybe you're working with, I was working at times with a department where there were just 30 people in the department that had to be surveyed. And I didn't want to use up 5 respondents for a pretest. So you could use up those respondents for a pretest and then keep their data because you've had them take the survey, even though they give you feedback. And even though maybe you do revise the survey, maybe you've only revised question 7 or question 10, the rest of the survey still works. With a very large, let's say the survey is going out to 1,000 people, you don't have to worry so much if you try to select 5 participants. I think it's less, you want to pick people for your pretest that are representative of a range. So maybe I purposefully choose different genders, different age groups, people that represent different cultures or some kind of set of differences for my pretest to make sure that I'm getting, 5 or 10 different perspectives and good feedback that way. I would not have people take the survey a second time because that will make them qualitatively different from all the other survey takers who are reacting to the first time they see questions. So I'd either plan to keep their data, or let's say in the case of, I have 1,000 respondents, I might toss the pretest data in that case. Good question. Any others?
Any more questions, comments, or maybe experiences you want to share?
Sure.
Okay, I have a question. So
Sure.
Sheila, in your practice, what platforms have you used in developing your surveys or your questionnaires to respondents or for your clients, for instance?
Sure.
Yeah.
Most of my experience with the online platforms is either in SurveyMonkey or using Google or Microsoft Forms. So often when I'm working with a client, I'm often not the person who's actually plugging the questions into a platform. So while I've seen surveys on Qualtrics, I've never been in the back end using it. One of the groups I work with is using Survey Hero, which I think is a new one on the scene, and they're very happy with it. And we took a look at it, but I didn't plug the questions in. So I don't have a lot to say about the platforms. If you're looking for a platform, look for one that is as robust as can be while still maintaining your budget, because some of them are pretty expensive. I did just learn that Survey Hero does offer nonprofit pricing, which I thought was very, very good. I don't know if the other platforms do that. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really recommend Google Forms and Microsoft Forms for a major survey. They're limited in in the question types and in the way that it's visually presented. I don't find those forms ideal.
Right. Thank you, Sheila.
You're
Any
welcome.
more? Anyone else? Okay. So I think Magdalene still has a follow-up. So she said, sometimes I fill in a survey and there's a comment section at the end. I sometimes add info that I felt I wasn't able to share throughout the survey, often because of the way the answer options were chosen. How would you go about analyzing such additional comments by a respondent?
That's a really good question too. So anytime you build a survey that has either open-ended questions or comment sections associated with particular questions, or sometimes at the end of a survey, there might be a question, is there anything else you'd like to share? And that just opens it up for the respondent to share anything. So how do you analyze? You want to make a plan for analysis. And it might be, if it's just like a catch-all, is there anything else you'd like to share? If I had a lot of responses to that, I might start coding in terms of what are they sharing about. But also, you may not necessarily analyze every single comment, right? So maybe if you've just given the organization some feedback on their survey and the way they ask the questions, they might just handle that as an individual comment, right? Not analyzed, but taken as good feedback. Sometimes those open-ended, those comment boxes can yield fabulous quotes that pair well with your survey data. So that's another reason to think about using open-ended questions is when you're looking to report on something, some of those quantitative results from other questions can be paired really nicely with a comment that sort of supports what you found through a set of closed-ended questions. Yeah, so you may or may not analyze every single comment.
Right, Magdalene, I hope your questions have been addressed. Okay, she said very helpful, thanks. Great.
You're welcome. Good questions.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for one more question. So anyone with a burning question, please, this is your moment. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. I don't see any hands raised either. So it looks like everyone is fine up to this point. So Sheila, do you have any like last words before we draw down the curtains?
Good luck to everyone. May your surveys yield rich, meaningful, nuanced data.
Thank you, and amen to that. Thank you so much, Sheila. It was
You're
great
welcome.
having you. And I'm sure we'll call on you some other time to give another exposition on this topic or maybe some other topic of interest.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so before we finally head out, I'll just like to share a number of links. So first of all, for those who have been part of today's session, please take a few minutes to provide feedback. So I believe this would be a good opportunity to hear from everyone who participated how the session was, and if you have any suggestions on subsequent sessions, please feel free to fill it out. And then you're also welcome to follow Women in RML on LinkedIn. So I'll just share so you can follow. And also we are on X. Sometimes it's difficult to say X, but yeah, now they're X. So we just have to get used to the new name. So formerly Twitter. So yeah, just follow and you'll be updated on latest or the next set of events. And then I'll just briefly want to share this upcoming program we have in October. So Women in RML, in collaboration with the Ghana Monitoring and Evaluation Forum, we're going to have more or less like a conference for women or female evaluators. It's called Women in Monitoring and Evaluation. So please note down the dates. So it's going to happen, well, towards the end of October, which would confirm the exact date and time and like the program lineup. But yeah, this is just to announce it and just to get you interested. And yeah, you can always reach out to me if you have ideas or anything you think should be discussed during the conference, and I can relay to the chief organizers. So Women in RML, we are supporting with the organization, but Ghana Monitoring and Evaluation Forum, the other ones leading on this. So it'll be great to have you all join so we can all learn together as well. Okay, so I would like to once again say a big thank you to Sheila for availing herself. Thank you so much, Sheila. And thank you to all our participants who joined us today. Shout outs to Bright, Eunice. We have someone who joined with an iPhone, Joy, Kamaldeen, Linda, Magdalene, Skipper. Someone joined with a Techno, KI5K, Vida, Bobby, and some joined and dropped off eventually. Huge thanks to you all, and yeah, looking forward to engaging you in our subsequent sessions. All right, Thank you, Sheila, and I wish you the very best of the day and nice weekend to everyone.